Hello, my name is Jessica, and for today's workshop, Phyllis and I will be talking about anti-Black racism and Black hair. Halton as we know it today is rich in the modern traditions of many First Nations and the Métis. From the lands of the Anishinaabe to the Tondarandon, the Haudenosaunee, and the Métis, these lands surrounding the Great Lakes are steeped in Indigenous history. We acknowledge and thank the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation for being stewards of this traditional territory.
We will begin this workshop with a discussion of black hair, starting with Don't Touch My Hair, along with hairstyles and accessories. We will then shift it over to anti-black racism, where we will be discussing the use of racial slurs and their meaning, some correct terms to refer to black people, and also deciphering the difference between ethnicity, nationality, and culture. And finally, we will end it off with some frequently asked questions along with a quick Q&A. Before we begin, we would like to provide everyone with a quick trigger warning. This presentation consists of topics that may be triggering, such as negative comments about black hair, negative stereotypes, the use of racial slurs towards the black community, and discussions about slavery and lynching. If at any point of this presentation you feel triggered by the following themes, please feel free to reach out and email Sahar or Hardeep as a resource. As a lot of you may know, our hair and the way we style it is vastly different from what is visibly common in today's society. And it's because of this that has gotten many non-black people curious to the point where they want to touch our hair. Now, this may not seem like a big deal, but it is for many black people, especially black girls and women, as we have to go through this everyday struggle of people touching our hair unannounced, whether it's at school or in the workplace. It is a very uncomfortable and dehumanizing experience we have to go through on a regular basis. In fact, it has reached to the point where it has been normalized in our society because some people believe they feel entitled to touching our hair and knowing what it feels like. Black female students in particular may take up to 8 or 9 hours to attain certain hairstyles we commonly wear. And oftentimes we have been harassed and demeaned for these styles throughout our lives, with people calling our hair untidy and dirty, to going as far as sticking different objects into our natural hair, such as pencils, sticks, small toy figures, and many more. And it's because of these experiences that it remains a sensitive topic for many of us, because we feel that we can no longer take pride in our hair without being treated like objects or animals in a petting zoo. It is understandable that many admire the way we style our hair and are generally interested in learning more about black hair, and that's totally fine. We just ask that you don't start touching our hair without our explicit permission, even if you do ask to touch our hair. If we say no, you must not get upset or feel offended. It is also important to note that the word no does not grant you permission to touch our hair anyways, so please refrain from doing that especially. Instead, you could just simply give us a compliment or ask us questions such as how we got our hair done or how long it took or even how people in our culture do our hair. In terms of how we manage it though, please do not ask if we wash our hair, if it's our real hair, or if we can tame our hair. It is important to understand that our hair is our crown and an extension of us, not only as individuals, but as a community as well. For many of us, this began way back when we were in primary or elementary school. And in my case, I've experienced it firsthand back in grade 2. There have been many instances where teachers who have taught me in the past will come up to me and start touching my hair. Some will even touch it while asking for my permission. Back in grade 2, I've actually experienced this firsthand when I first started wearing protective styles such as box braids and crochet weave. And quite frankly, it has continued on to high school up until the start of the pandemic. Earlier on, I didn't really think anything of it because I generally thought they were interested in learning about my hair. But looking back at it now, I'm kind of upset at myself for not saying anything, as it was very dehumanizing and uncomfortable for me, especially at an age where I didn't really understand why it was such a common occurrence for me, along with other students who look like me.
Now let's get into hairstyles and accessories. Accessories like do-rags, head wraps, and scarves are typically used by Black people to set hairstyles so that they can look sleek and well cut for long periods of time. Some examples of hairstyles that would need these tools would be waves, straightened hair, and keeping hair gelled down. There's also a variety of hairstyles that can be done as a way to protect hair from breakage and damage. The most common are braids, twists, weaves, also known as hair extensions, wigs, and locks, which should not be called dreads, by the way, because dreads was a term created by white people in the 1700s as they deemed the hairstyle to be dreadful looking. A few problematic phrases and questions that many black people are faced with have to do with the stereotyping and the abstract idea of what good hair means for different people. Saying that a person has good or nice hair can be a compliment, but it is very rarely used in this context when it comes to black girls and black women. It is typically used to single out particular hair types, mainly 4C or 4B hair types that are very kinky and curly, as shown on the screen. It also encourages the stereotype that biracial or Caucasian hair textures that range from 1A to 3C, which will be shown later in the presentation, are the only beauty standard. Having good hair is not based on how straight your hair is, how loose of a curl it has, its length, or the color. It is solely based on whether or not it's healthy. A frequent statement, even if you have not heard it yourself, is that do-rags and bandanas are often associated with gang and street culture. The culture of origin is Western black culture, so to associate do-rags and bandanas with gang culture would be blatantly ignorant or otherwise prejudice. They are not hats or a fashion statement. They are a means of maintenance and basic upkeep of our hair, which is different from most or all of yours. Many, if not all, black women and black girls face microaggressions on a daily, and these start as early as elementary school. Questions such as, "Is that your real hair?" make people who are black feel uncomfortable and insecure about how they do their hair or wear their natural hair out. Wearing protective styles is not just for fashion, but for healthy hair as well as avoiding prejudice. Not too long ago, it was against company policies for black women to have their natural hair out or to wear braids, because it was considered unprofessional. There's many things we've been told as well. Some include, "You look like Medusa," "Your hair looks like pubic hair," "Your hair is ugly," "It's prettier when it's straight," "What if you just cut it?" "You should get a relaxer." For those of you who don't know, relaxer has a similar concept as one of perms, except relaxers permanently straighten hair instead of the way a perm would curl the hair. Many of the phrases listed can come off as disrespectful or insinuating that black hair is not beautiful, which is not true. Just remember that it is better to ask questions and be open to new information than to make assumptions.
Now we're going to take a look at the use of the racial slurs and their meaning. Before we continue, just a quick trigger warning. Some of the topics being discussed will be linked to the horrific actions that occurred during and after slavery, such as lynching and the dehumanization of black people. Here we have a list of some of the many racial slurs that have been used against black people and other people of African descent. It is understandable as some may be familiar with these slurs, and others not so much. Either way, it is still very important to understand the meaning behind them, as they are offensive to many, even when people try to reclaim them. The N-word comes from the word Negro, meaning black, which is not an offensive term, but also not politically correct. It was originally used by slave masters during the lynching of an enslaved black person. Mulatto is a racial classification referring to a mixed race or biracial person mixed with European and African ancestry. The slur derives from the word mule, an offspring horse and donkey. The slur coon originates from the word raccoon. It was previously known for its caricature stemming back to slavery, as it was defined as a lazy, easily frightened, chronically idle, and an inarticulate buffoon. Today, the word has been redefined as a black person who is ignorant with white discrimination and unknowingly suffers with self-hatred. Now, one thing they all have in common is that over time they have been redefined in some way. The N-word has become more desensitized in our society, with many black people reclaiming the word as a way to take back the power they've lost centuries ago. It is a similar case with mulatto, as some biracial or mixed-race people would reclaim the word as well. Both use it in a general context, as they're mainly referring to other people or themselves. Coon, however, has been redefined to further demean black people, specifically those who may have certain beliefs and views that may not satisfy the opposing side. This is fairly common in a political setting where some black people may have beliefs that are perceived to be more conservative as opposed to their liberal counterparts. Either way, when offensive terms like these are being said by any student, regardless of who reclaims it, the context it's being used in, or the student's standpoint, they are still offensive to many and should immediately be addressed as inappropriate for a school environment. Let's take a look at some correct terms to refer to black people. Here we have our general term, black. It is described as a racialized classification referring to individuals with all kinds of pigmentations in African ancestry. When referring to a black individual in text, it is important to capitalize the B, as it reflects on a shared sense of identity and community, especially for those who are unable to specifically identify with their African ancestry. It is best to also refer to the individual by one of the default terms, such as Black Canadian and or Black person. Some individuals may have a specific preference in regards to how they would like to be identified, such as African Canadian, mixed race, biracial, and in some cases, person of color. However, unless stated otherwise, it is always best to refer to us by one of the default terms.
Now let's talk about the difference between ethnicity, nationality, culture, and race. The exact definitions of these words are shown to you on the slide, but to further understand them, race is more of a social construct invented during colonization to divide and create a class system for those who are white, black, and colored, which today we call racialized. According to Britannica.com, genetic studies in the late 20th century invalidated the existence of biogenetically distinct races. And now scholars argue that races are cultural interventions reflecting specific attitudes and beliefs that were imposed on different populations in the wake of Western European conquest, also known as colonization, beginning in the 15th century. Today, more emphasis is put on ethnicity, while it is not always about someone's place of birth, but more of a place of origin that one identifies with by blood and heritage. For example, our ethnicities would be myself, Ghanaian, Chanel, Nigerian, and Phyllis, Kenyan. Ethnicity is a correlation between race and culture, but pertains more to background, where culture pertains more to where you are from. Culture is a combination of food, music, language, including any slang, traditions, and customs relative to a place.
If we dig back
Into Ghanaian culture, it includes various languages such as Chi and Ga, food like jollof rice, and kente or entoma, which is a type of cloth used for items such as dresses, bags, and other pieces. Nationality is what unites everyone watching the slideshow, our common nationality as Canadians. So let's get into the frequently asked questions. Why do you have to do protective hairstyles? The kinkier hair types have a more coarse texture and are dry, especially in the winter, so it's very important to protect the hair from exposure at certain times in the particular seasons, such as summer or winter. This helps to prevent potential damage or breakage. Hair textures are ranked by a numerical system based on the shape of the hair strand and the subclassification using the letters A to C for the width and diameter of the curl. This system was created in the 90s as an easier way in order to classify hair. Keep in mind that people can have various curl textures on their head, so this is only a guide. So 1A would be bone straight hair, and 4C is kinky, curly hair, the end of the spectrum. If I were curious about the origin of someone's name, how would I ask about it? You can simply go, "Hey, I like your name. I was wondering what it stands for or what it means." How do I get involved in the Black conversation? Instead of saying you understand what they've been through when you aren't Black, it is better to acknowledge your privilege as someone who isn't. Speak out against any injustices and be supportive on the sidelines. In other words, be a good ally. You should not try to change the center of the conversation towards another race of people when issues are specific to the Black community are talked about as well. Thank you so much for listening to this presentation, and we hope you enjoyed it. Now take everything you learned and go use it to be a great ally.